All right, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this webinar. My name is Josh Prushin. I'm store manager for Underwood Jewelers in sunny Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm also the program director for the American Gem Society Young Title Holders. I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar as Monica shows us the first steps of responsible sourcing. This webinar is sponsored by the Young Title Holders of the American Gem Society. And again, on behalf of our president, Mark Nadasi of the NEI Group, thank you for joining us today. Couple quick announcements before we get into this webinar. Number one, the Mentor-Mentee program is still avidly looking for both mentors and mentees of all areas of this industry, whether you're a supplier, sales, or management. If you would like to be a mentor or a mentee, we ask that you just email youngtitleholders@ags.org. Second announcement is one of the perks of being an American Gem Society member is that you can take over the Young Title Holder social media pages. Again, if you are a supplier or a retailer and you would like to take over our social media page, contact us at youngtitleholders@ags.org. And last but not least, in a couple, 3 weeks, we are going to Conclave in beautiful Seattle, Washington. And as Monica just let me know, it looks like there should be no rain, so cross your fingers and knock on wood. We are heading there April 8th through the 10th. So what you need to do now is log on to the ags.org and go ahead and register for that awesome event. This event will give you a year-long energy and ideas to help propel your education and your business forward. So without further ado, Monica, take it away.
Thank you, Josh. Hello, everyone. I'm Monica Stevenson and founder of the jewelry blog idazzle.com and Onza Gems. And very excited to be speaking today and for American Gem Society Young Title Holders. And I have to say, I'm so excited that AGS Conclave is coming to Seattle in 3 weeks. I really can't say enough good things about the organization and about Conclave. It's really an opportunity to connect with people who are absolutely committed to ethics, integrity, and the education is really outstanding. And I don't just say that because I'm one of the speakers, but I am one of the speakers. So lots of incredible opportunities for learning and connecting. And I really can't recommend it highly enough. So, and did I mention it's sunny in Seattle today, 70 degrees and sunny. I cannot guarantee that weather, but and also they did not pay me to say this, but I really am a believer. So come if you can. Would love to have you. So if you're coming to Seattle, that's kind of one kind of journey. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a different journey, and I'm standing on the edge of a really big hole in the ground. And I'm looking down into this hole, and it's about a 30% grade with slippery shale all the way down to kind of this murky bottom. And that's actually just to get to the entrance of the mine. So I'm standing at the top of a Savarite garnet mine in Kenya and kind of wondering, how did I get here? Why am I here? And am I actually going to take the step down into this new adventure? So I ended up in East Africa after I saw a random tweet from Sharing the Rough jewelry documentary that was going to trace the gem's journey from the dirt in East Africa all the way through the faceting process and setting it into a finished piece of jewelry. For some reason, at this point in my career, at the time that I saw this tweet and then explored this, I can't explain it, but I had to go. I had to really see where gems come from. So I flew 9,000 miles and joined 13 people I'd never met before. We bounced for about 3 hours over what I will loosely call roads. And then we had hiked into the entrance of this mine. So, am I going to do this? Am I actually going to go down that path into the mine? I guess it would be a pretty short story if I didn't. So yes, I did go down, and then down some more, and then finally ended up in the actual mine shaft itself. which is short enough that I had to duck because you would otherwise hit your head on the hard rock that surrounds you, that it's kind of carved out of by hand. So about 20 steps in, the light is gone. So I switch on a headlamp, and it's also super humid, so sweat starts to roll and drip off of my nose, and it's getting harder and harder to breathe the further in you go. So the main mine shaft snakes into the ground probably another 150 meters, which is over 450 feet. And it's taking turns and twists and dropping every few feet. They're following the rift. They're following the strata in the rock that's actually yielding the green. The whole reason that they're digging and keep going. So finally, we arrive at the end of the shaft, and it's a little bit of an opening, and miners are using rebar and mallets to cleave these big chunks of earth off. And then as it falls to the floor, they're kind of going through it with their hands. And there, in the palm of a hand, by the light of a headlamp, was green. So that day they found something, but obviously, of course, many, many days they do not. The amount of work to get this one small green Tsavorite was staggering. So that day really marked when I truly understood where gems come from. So I finally connected, maybe for the first time, to what it means to find a gem. My experience had always been, at the jewelry counter and in Vegas, and you see all of these incredible gems and jewelry, but this is really where my journey kind of awareness and concrete steps really started, because I understood my actions, are affecting someone else on the other side of the planet. So we talk about responsibility, but what does that mean really? And I've come to realize that responsible sourcing, sustainable practices, ethical sourcing, whatever you want to call it, it's not really a checklist. It's not bag and tag technology. It's not hard hats and safety vests. For me, at least, it's knowing the impact of my decisions and who is on the other side of that equation. So I also believe that responsibility is not a singular effort. It's a communal endeavor. We can't do it by ourselves in a vacuum. Our actions have consequences on everyone else down the line. As Alexandra Hart says, she's a jewelry designer and ethical metalsmiths president. True responsibility may not even be achievable. It's definitely not if you think of it as perfection. So to me, responsibility is also sort of aspirational. So what's a girl from Iowa doing in a gem mine in Africa? This is clearly not a linear path. So actually, I started out in jewelry as a salesperson in an American Gem Society retailer. I am forever grateful that my path started at MC Ginsburg Jewelers in Iowa City, Iowa. It was my first job when I was in college, and whenever I am asked for career advice, particularly around the jewelry business, I often recommend that people start with retail. Even if they're brand new to the industry and have done something else, retailers are on the front lines. You're the last mile that jewelry has to go through to get placed in the ultimate customer's hands. So we can mine and make and manufacture all we want, but at some point we actually have to sell that product to the customer. And I will forever be grateful to Mark Ginsburg and Jane Worstel, some of the best in the biz, that I got to learn from them early on in my career. And I feel like that understanding of the pressures that retailers face and that need to stay relevant to the customer that really helps me kind of frame my story and make me relevant. So MC Ginsburg, I was lucky enough that they treated jewelry as art. This was at the forefront of designer jewelry. And with an art history and fine arts major, it just really clicked for me that jewelry was small sculpture. So I was kind of hooked at that point. So over the past 20 years, I've done a deep dive into all things jewelry. I've bought, I've sold, I've taken GIA courses. I've helped Amazon launch their jewelry business in the early 2000s. I started a jewelry blog. I wanted to say 10 years ago. It was actually 11 years ago, to tell the stories of artisan jewelers. By 2012 or 2013 or so, after I'd been doing the blog a couple of years, I found myself more and more attracted to and moved by interviews with various people who were involved in kind of responsible sourcing. So people like Jennifer Dawes, who's a jewelry designer in San Francisco, who goes to great lengths to procure responsible materials and practices in her studio. And an interview with Dorothee Gazenga of the Diamond Development Initiative was very, very critical to me, and really moving about their program for artisanal diamond miners in places like Sierra Leone, kind of the worst of the worst. And I think when I saw that tweet about the trip to Africa, maybe I was kind of questioning a little bit. I was maybe looking for meaning. Why do we buy, make, and sell these sparkly things? Is there something beyond the sparkle? So after the documentary trip in 2014, I kind of couldn't sleep. Words just poured out of my brain. Before I went, I wasn't sure what I was actually going to see there. Would there be guns? Would there be children working in the mines? Terrible examples of forced labor. The narrative has been in this industry, blood diamond since 2008, and I was susceptible too. So what I saw, though, is in this region, at least when we're talking about gemstone mining, I just see people working really, really hard with like shovels and pickaxes and digging in the ground to find pretty shiny rocks that the rest of us use in jewelry. And really, with very few exceptions, the people at the beginning of this chain really don't have very much to do with the end of it, not with the profits, not with the recognition. They're toiling in the dirt, and they're not really seeing a lot of benefit from that. So I really had kind of a hard time with this. This is my livelihood. This is my business. And the fact that I don't really want it to come at the expense of anyone else. And really, they want what we want. They want to be educated. They want their children to do better than they do. There's no chemicals involved with gemstone mining. There's little to no, sort of forced labor in this particular area. So my thoughts turned to how could I help? So I came up with a business model, and I thought that I could take my experience in the industry, my now, contacts in East Africa, my designer friends who are very concerned about gem provenance, and my storytelling, and I would connect all of the dots. And I would travel to East Africa and to the mining regions, and I would buy rough gems. I would have it cut in the US by US artisan cutters. And then some of those gems would be set into capsule collections by really great, wonderful, renowned US jewelry designers. And then when those things sell, I would reinvest back into the mining communities. People that I know there, schools that we are connected with. This is a Maasai primary school in Tanzania, near a ruby mine. And there's also a couple of trade schools in Arusha. One is the Arusha Gemological and Jewelry Vocational Center. And you can see that that's pretty primitive equipment. There's a plan to replace that. I'll kind of come to that a little bit later. But the idea would be to invest in education to kind of raise, awareness and participation in the gem industry, and make it a little bit more level playing field. So I think it's important to say that I don't really look at charity as a way to truly instigate change. Charity is hard to sustain. So in this case, this is a sustainable business model where you involve the local African dealers and miners. They have to be invested in the trade, and they have to have skin in the game. So real change, I think, happens when there's an economic model and an incentive to succeed. So starting this company really was, in a way, just as crazy as, signing up to go to Africa in the first place. It was so insane that when I was writing the business plan, I ran across the Swahili word anza, which means begin. And I thought, okay, this is crazy enough. I just have to start somewhere. So just begin. What's interesting is when I started this, I really thought that the huge benefit would be, my personal benefit would be helping the mining communities. And that actually has been really, really interesting and very rewarding. Also, at times, very challenging. These are kids getting a hot lunch, primarily because of Roger and Ginger Dairy traveling to this region and bringing retailers and people with them who see the need, and kind of were doing this on a more informal basis. But at some point we found out that the kids no longer had a hot lunch, and it was really affecting the attendance and their test scores. And thanks to Roger and Ginger and Nancy Shuring of Devon Fine Jewelry, who really spearheaded this, and some other really caring retailers and people in the industry, they're now funding a lunch program at this Maasai school. It feeds about 500 students once a day with rice and beans, and really it's a truly remarkable effort that improves the lives of these kids a lot, and it's improved test scores, and the school population has definitely expanded. Also, they're finding more ruby material at the nearby mine. So this lunch program, and also a library that Dan Lynch, he's a gem cutter and kind of just lovely human who has actually spearheaded building a library, and many, many retailers and people in the industry came over with books loaded in their suitcases. And so the whole community actually now has a library and hot lunch. And to say the impact has been huge is really important, because some of these kids walk 5 to 9 kilometers, and I'm not making that up. Like, I've driven it to their homes, to their boma, their village, and it took us like 35 or 40 minutes to drive there, let alone these kids are walking every day. So having a hot lunch in the middle of the day is a huge thing. This is a small thing that GEMS can do. The idea of supporting artisans, particularly women artisans, at every step of my process, from the miners to the designers to the final finished jewelry, has become a more important part of my circle, and what adds a lot of value for me personally. So I have a woman who cuts gems for me, actually a couple of women. This is Beth Steer of Michigan. And this is cut by Anna Gilbert in North Carolina. And I try to support women, at the mining level, at the cutting level. Actually, these photographs were taken by Sarah Ray in San Diego. So I try to get as granular as I can. I look for, supporting women kind of wherever I can in my business. And actually our packaging supports women. Those pouches that you see are made of Maasai fabric by a friend who is Tanzanian. She lives in Arusha, and she employs other Maasai women to make the bead little circles, and then she sews the pouches. And every time I go, I order another quantity. And to me, it's not a huge amount, but to her, it really makes a material difference. It's a significant source of income for her. So speaking of helping women, something that I'm truly, excited about is helping women at the mining level in East Africa. These are some of the most marginalized people on the planet, let alone in our supply chain. If we think that lack of trade education is, limiting East Africans in general from participating in the gem trade, think about women and the lack of access. It's a gulf. It's just enormous. So GIA has been working on a really exciting initiative with PACT, an NGO. PACT is an NGO that has a mines to markets division. And they do a lot of different things all over the globe, but particularly in Africa, they focus on mining communities and education and support for artisanal mining communities. So GIA and PACT partnered with TAWOMA, which is the Tanzania Women Miner Association, to develop a pilot project for an educational book that Robert Weldon, in particular, really helped develop. So it's simple. It's mostly images of minerals and gems that are found in the area. I love the fact that, having been there, this tool really meets the women where they're at. It would not make sense to go in and do a high-tech gem lab for these women in this area yet. I mean, I can dream in the future, but this is something that meets them exactly where they are at currently. It's in Swahili. It's mostly pictures. It's plasticized pages that aren't going to get destroyed at the mining site. And it comes with these plastic trays that work for gem sorting and maybe some, just kind of rough evaluation. Just with simple water and sunlight or a mirror, you can actually kind of start to get at the quality that you're finding. So this project, when I heard about this, I was just instantly struck by the potential impact. I have visited the Tanga region, and multiple times, actually, I've been to the mining sites, and I've purchased sapphires and garnets and tourmalines from this area. These are really gorgeous umba sapphires that come out of the ground in these colors. They're not heated, just really beautiful material. So the fact that this was an educational effort, something that I clearly believe in, and because I feel this is kind of the way forward for them, this just aligned with my values perfectly, and I immediately realized that I want to help provide a market for these gems. If you help women, you're helping their families and their entire communities. That's kind of true the world over, but it's especially true in these communities. It's been shown over and over again. This is why the Gates Foundation focuses a lot on women in their initiatives. So I traveled with PACT and Stuart Poole of 1948 and a representative of Everledger to these mining communities in Tonga, where the book had been distributed. And we, that's Stuart of 1948. And we went to their mines. We went to these women's mines. This is the trek to a mine through a cornfield. This is, I think it's a garnet mine, Miriam. And we asked them, we got into a schoolroom in Yombeni, Tanzania, and we asked them, what do you need? Like, what can we do to help you? What are your challenges? And we let them talk while we listened. We would like to create a sustainable model together with them that would include a small premium, kind of like the Fairmine Gold model, that would then be reinvested back into these women and their villages with their particular needs and challenges. So they told us that they need more resources, like for their local primary school. This is the primary school. You can see they could probably use some resources. They need teacher salaries. They could use some gem mining and grading equipment. They could use a medical clinic closer than 10 kilometers away. If you don't have a vehicle and you're a pregnant woman or you have a sick child, 10 kilometers is just too far. So, we've faced some challenges with our plans, mainly in that the Tanzanian government had a rough gem export ban for about a year. The ban has been lifted to some extent. We're still navigating the details of how the exporting is going to work. But the effect on these fragile subsistence mining, villages is pretty devastating. Bottom line is they don't have enough cutters to really process their material. So while it's a noble goal to process a lot in country, the reality is that they're not quite ready for it. So in order to help them get ready for it, in order to help the women, we're moving forward. And Anza Gems, my company, 1948, Stuart Poole's company, are working with Everledger for tracking and tracing these gems from mine to market. And we're working with Pact and Tuwoma. So we are going to begin the process. We're working towards a market day later this spring, where we'll begin the process of paying fair trade prices to the women, hopefully via mobile payments, and then tracking these gems from mine to the end consumer. So we'll be working on building regional gem offices. We're going to work towards training some of the women to cut their own material in various little regional offices. And we're going to focus on reinvesting profits back into the areas that the women themselves identify as their priorities. We are hoping to kind of transform this. This is something that has taken a while to kind of take shape, small increments, small changes, but in the end, we have a brand of gemstones. We're going to call it Moyo Gemstones, Moyo, which means heart or life in Swahili and other African languages across kind of sub-Saharan Africa. So we do need funding to bring these to market, and we really need customers to buy these gems. So be sure to contact me if you have any ideas or if you're interested in more information. We can use all the help we can get. But I always have a word or a phrase to begin each year, each new year. And a couple of years ago, my phrase was dream big. And little did I know that this is the project for me. This Tanzanian Women's Project is my dream big. So that's my responsible gem story. And I chose the path, or maybe it chose me. But I guess the question is, why would anyone else choose responsible? Responsibility typically isn't the fun thing. It's doing your homework or eating your vegetables. So the short answer is, of course, it's the right thing to do. But much like this kid, we don't really want to say, because I told you so. But, the reality is that we live in a world where people really care about where their tomato comes from. There's tracking and tracing on fish. People will ask, where does a gemstone come from? Where did this diamond originate? Was there mercury involved in this gold? So if you think that the demand for the information and the ability and availability of the information to reach the end consumer, if you think that's going away or it's not happening, I think you need to reassess. We hear the words blockchain, trust chain. There's the company Everledger. There's many, many different forms that this kind of tracking and tracing is taking. But we're close to a point where you could scan a code and see the mining region, the individual artisans who cut and set the jewelry. So we're moving towards greater transparency, like it or not. Maybe it's a good thing. I think we probably have to embrace it to some level and own it. So, and the flip side is, there are good stories to tell, and I think maybe we want to be, as an industry, we want to be the conduit of the really good stories, the really beautiful stories. And, ultimately being responsible, it might be the only way to actually ensure our future, not just in terms of materials, but also how we stay relevant to consumers. There's a lot of talk about millennials and the next generation and what's important to them. And sometimes just the sparkle is not that important to them. It is about the story. So I kind of think of responsibility now as, a journey. We're all getting on at a different place. We all bring a different set of experiences. We might also all have a different destination in mind. But, the important thing is that we do what we can and we decide our priorities. I guess my journey looks maybe more like this. So how's it working out for me? Well, I've made 10 more trips to East Africa. I've visited many, many more mines. After that very first one, I have gone into mines. I have not gone into mines, as the case may be, but I've met so many people who have had a huge impact on my life, who've changed my life, actually. I've been to their homes. I've been to their villages. And I've also seen lots of really wonderful wildlife on the way to those mines. But I've purchased a lot of gems. We have sold a lot of really beautiful gems at the wholesale level and at retail, to designers and retailers who really care very deeply about where their gems come from. And actually, we've even won awards for the designs that the gems have ultimately ended up in. So I think that consumers and even people in the trade are thrilled and so happy to have transparency and to have a purchase that not only do you know that it's not doing harm, it's actually doing good and supporting people. So you don't just have to take my word for it. It turns out that there's some data out there that consumers will actually, pay for the something that is marketed as like responsible. And this slide, this is from NPD, which is a consumer retail data company. They compile and parse and distribute various retail data and trends. This was a study that they published in 2017. But as a whole, this slide kind of shows that consumers don't think we're doing too badly as an industry in terms of responsibility, but we sort of suck at telling the story. And not only are consumers concerned about that story and asking about that story, but they also, it looks like they're willing to pay more for it if, particularly, I think if something was really documented or there was something to kind of elaborate why something is responsible. They're willing to pay up to 20% more, which means that products that might have a premium attached to them, like Fairmine Gold, for instance, or maybe this gemstone initiative that goes back into the communities, maybe that premium actually could be justified. But we have to be able to do the storytelling to actually create that value and to actually create that need. So, all right, so we know that it makes sense, perhaps, to embrace responsibility. But not everyone obviously can travel to Africa or whatever country, Sri Lanka, and go buy the gems, themselves and then market them like that. That may not be your model. That may not be possible for where you're at. But there are some ways out there that you can connect either with a community that's out there that has resources and knowledge and information, or maybe you just need the community. Maybe you just need to know that there are other people out there who care. One organization that I'm really excited about is Gem Legacy. And this is a new 501c3 that was started by Roger Ginger and Rachel Derry. It supports education, vocational training, and really just kind of general support of local economies in East Africa specifically. This is an extension of work that Roger and his family have done more informally for years, along with the people who've traveled with him. Most people get sort of hooked on on this region and want to do their part. The cool thing about this is that you can choose to support your own specific interest in various initiatives. So if kids and women are kind of like where your heart is, or if education is really important to you, if equipment and knowing that they have the right tools, there's an initiative to kind of support that. So it just launched in September, and one of the initiatives that I was actually involved in was an initiative to purchase a compressor for some women miners, a women mining co-op that's mostly widows and kind of people in the community in Kenya. And within 3 months, that initiative was fully funded, and the compressor has been purchased and is in action in Africa. I mean, if you're at all familiar with African time, this is positively astounding that something could happen that quickly and that smoothly. So it's literally on the ground, being used for power tools so that they can mine more efficiently and safer, that they will actually have oxygen now when they get to a certain depth. Plus they can help the rest of the people in their mining community. It's really a fantastic success story. So, it's a testament to the industry, how the industry has kind of received this nonprofit vehicle and this idea of kind of reinvesting back on the supply side. So I'm actually on the board of advisors for this org, and I really believe in this power of the collective good. It gives me a vehicle for my ONZA 10% back to those regions in a way that I can be personally involved in. The Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference, this is the third one that's coming up in late October of 2019. And just to show you that there is a movement here, that's 2 whole days devoted just to the theme of responsibility. So we're talking about every layer and level of the industry. And in 2018, it was a really international gathering of designers and manufacturers, suppliers, people from Italy, France, US, really talking about kind of like the joys and the challenges of what they're working on. And my company, ONZA, and PACT brought in Salma Kundi. That's her photo here. She's a Tanzanian women miner. She's actually the Secretary General of the Tanzanian Women Miners Association. And we brought in PACT manager from Tanzania, Norbert, and they got to tell the story of women artisanal miners in East Africa. That kind of representation doesn't happen very often. I think that's really special. So this conference is kind of a unique opportunity to really hear a lot of voices, even voices that you would not normally ever get to hear at a conference. This is a little out of order. This is the compressor. This is a very happy Esther and Beatrice of the Precious Women Mining Group in Kenya. And they're standing in front of their purchased compressor. So sorry, that slipped in there. I am on the board of Ethical Metalsmiths, and it's a nonprofit that provides education, promotion, and resources to really, anyone who's interested in responsible jewelry practices. It's a very inclusive community. It helps connect studio artisan makers, designers, manufacturers, suppliers, and even the ultimate consumer, who really are curious about responsibility and wanting to do the right thing. As a group, we're about to launch supplier pages, which would include like a supplier self-assessment that might help, if you're a retailer or a designer looking for a supplier, help identify someone who matches your values. And also there will be a self-assessment available for jewelry designers so that consumers who are curious about who to use in a particular area or who should they have make their wedding rings, there's a resource for people to go find them. And then on the international side, there's the Responsible Jewelry Council, RJC, UK-based, also nonprofit. They're more dedicated towards standard setting and certification in the industry. So they have a code of practices established for categories in precious metals and diamonds. And I think they're about to release a colored gemstone standard as well. Members are not only kind of committed to really, best practices, but they are actually audited against them. It's one of the few regulatory bodies in the industry. So it's mostly been for larger players, but they're working hard to try and be, include some smaller players as well. And all of the practices that they publish are open source. So all of the information is out there, which is great. Jewelry Industry Summit. Some of you may have either attended in New York City or heard about, or in Tucson. This is a gathering which is really a really wide cross-section of the incredibly diverse jewelry industry constituents, all across the industry, from the smallest studio artists to the largest companies, but all working towards actionable issues and initiatives and kind of a shared vision of responsibility and transparency. So you can go to their website and find out, kind of stay informed about what they're working on, the various really amazing initiatives that are kind of coming out of this. And then at the grassroots level, there are things like Toby Pomeroy and the Mercury Free Mining Challenge. Mercury is just a complete scourge in the industry and really needs to be eliminated. And Toby Pomeroy, he's a jewelry designer, but he's been a pioneer for, a champion for clean gold for many years. So he's working towards a solution. It's going to take money, it's going to take science, technology, creativity, but this is an idea. It's very simple. You can go, even if like today you walk out and you just support something like this initiative, it's making an impact. It's really making a difference. So, can we fix everything at once? No, but there's information out there. There's communities out there. There's new things all the time. If anything, we probably need to consolidate some of these efforts, but I'm just excited that there are efforts out there and that you can kind of choose based on your priorities. So if you are on your journey already, or if you are just starting your journey, maybe a few simple things that you can do. What I'm basically going to tell you is to be a pain in the ass. You need to ask questions. You need to ask questions of your suppliers, of your customers. You need to push for answers. You might need to be willing to change your behavior based on what you hear. So based on what you find, or maybe some part of your inventory might change. But just remember that, I give you permission to be a pain in the ass and actually be the squeaky wheel. And that's how things happen. So a few simple things. I like to start with, in your studio or workshop. These are a few things that you could look at doing that have an immediate impact, immediate benefit on your health or your employees' health, or maybe you have contractors or vendors. Looking at something as simple as a really great filtration system that is going to, improve your health, your breathing. Ergonomics is huge. Maybe you've been meaning to raise that counter for 2 years, and actually everyone will thank you for saving your back if you go ahead and change the flow, change it. So those are a few things that some of my studio friends have kind of let me know are ways that they have made an improvement in their studio and their life. Metals are so critical. Every single thing that we produce in fine jewelry involves some kind of precious metal. And it's also probably where some of the biggest abuses happen in terms of, mercury, forced labor, the destruction of environment. We really need to look at metals as a way to be more responsible. Recycled metals, obviously, there's a lot of talk about that. There's different stratas within recycled. Hoover and Strom and Stoller, for instance, won't do metals from electronics due to child labor. So the more people who are asking for and getting certified for Fairmine Gold, we're creating more demand, which means that more villages in Peru or in South America and Africa might change over to this Fairmine model, which is only beneficial for us and for them. So, again, if all you can do is make a donation to Mercury Free Mining Challenge, maybe that's your contribution. Maybe that's what you can do short term. But looking at these other areas is important. Diamonds. There are some designers doing some incredible things with recycled vintage cuts. Consumers love it. They love the uniqueness of it. Some vendors, such as Perpetuum, they actually have documentation that it is certified reclaimed. That's an important source, perhaps. Maybe you also look at kind of focusing on a region, do your research on Canadian diamonds, understand what the pros and cons are. Rio Tinto, for instance, Argyle, they have pretty progressive mining policies and conditions. Find your focus, find something that's going to give people options. Say what you like about created diamonds, but if consumers are asking for that, at least going through the process of vetting a really good created diamond vendor so that you have that as an option. But I will say, as someone involved in mining communities, that, don't forget that, natural diamonds support entire communities too. We can't write off an entire continent based on a little bit of marketing. And gemstones. There are people out there, small suppliers who are, they're focused on particular regions. They really know where the gems are coming from. Maybe they're giving back or doing something good in those areas. Even just going through the process of asking your supplier, do they even know? Did it change hands 4 times during Tucson alone? Starting to understand where things come from is a big part of making these decisions. And beads are really problematic, just so you know. So be very, very careful about your sources for any kind of beads. So that was pretty brief, but kind of an overview. I'm not going to lie, to kind of close this out. I can get a little overwhelmed when I'm actually in East Africa and I see, widespread poverty. I see, lack of infrastructure, lack of basic human amenities that no one single industry can fix, let alone one person or one company. So I sometimes feel like it's, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And I think I can only help these 5 or 6 or 10 families. But then I have to kind of flip that and say, I can help these 5 or 6 or 10 families, and that helps their extended family, and that helps their village or their community, and suddenly there is an impact. So bottom line, responsibility, responsible sourcing, it's a lot of different things to different people, and it can mean responsibility in your business practices and who you choose to support in your local community or in the broader global community. But when we make these choices, we start to benefit, people on the other side of the equation. We benefit these faces. So we don't really have a future if we can't make this work for everyone in the supply chain. We may not ever reach perfection, but we have to keep trying. We have to keep reaching to get closer. So if we win, everyone wins. So in the interest of time and possible technology malfunction, I am not going to take questions live here, but I really want to know your questions. I really want to hear from you if you have thoughts, questions, ideas, and also, of course, AGS Conclave. I have to tell you that. But you can reach me, Monica, at idazzle.com. I would love to hear from you. And you can also just follow my adventures at idazzle and at Anza Gems on Instagram. But I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in.